It is now my great pleasure to introduce to you our first patient speaker today, and it's Andy Clay. Andy is very well known to AMMF. A nice tie, Andy, thank you. He is a cholangiocarcinoma patient advocate extraordinaire. He has worked with us on NICE applications and so on. He is an AMMF discussion forum moderator, and he is a superb hand on the tiller there. Now, he's going to take us through his own cholangiocarcinoma journey, what he's learned along the way, and what he now asks of the cholangiocarcinoma community. So thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Helen. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to start off by giving you a little overview of what I've been through as a cholangiocarcinoma patient. I've told the story before. I've written about it on the forum, so hopefully for those that have heard it before, please bear with me, and I'll get through as quickly as I can. 2017 was my first diagnosis. I was living in Singapore at the time, but had come on holiday to visit my mum in December. We'd had a big family gathering. My brother and his family, my family, and my sister's children had all come to Torquay to visit my mum. We were supposed to be going out on a big fishing trip, all of us, and I felt really unwell. I thought I'd got constipation, had a terrible pain in my abdomen, and I said, look, I'm really sorry, I can't go. Please carry on without me. I'm going to spend the day in bed. I feel terrible. During that time, I went to the loo and saw very pale stools. And in a typical male fashion, and I dread to generalize, but I think a lot of men do this, I thought, that doesn't look good, but I'll see what happens over the next few days, and if it goes away, I'll just carry on as normal. And if it doesn't, maybe I'll do something about it. So it passed over a couple of days. We flew back to Singapore, and then throughout sort of the end of December and January, I had what I would describe as a lot of bowel issues. Went to the GP. He said, oh, you've got irritable bowel syndrome, which sort of roughly translates into, I've no idea, but we'll sort of figure this out. And then just towards the end of January, I went to the loo at work, and my urine was the colour of stew tea. And I thought, once again, that doesn't look good. Except this time, I did the sensible thing and went to see my doctor. And he said, you've got a blocked bile duct, you're going jaundice. Now, he said, could be a few things, might be a cyst, could be a gallstone, and it could be a tumour, benign or otherwise, but we'll pack you off and see what we can find out. I was referred to a GI, he did ERCP, placed a stent in, just said, I don't think it's very good news. A couple of weeks later, I was in chronic pain. I went back to the GI and said, look, I'm really, really struggling. I've got a lot of pain. And he said, oh, don't worry about it. I just injected a lot of gas and dye, which will have upset your stomach. So you don't have to worry about it. It'll just pass in a few more days. The pain was so bad, I started hallucinating. The furniture in the living room was moving around and all sorts of strange things were happening. I hadn't eaten any magic mushrooms, so I pretty much knew that wasn't the case. So I went into A&E, was admitted with acute pancreatitis, and spent 3 weeks in hospital with that. The pancreatitis also induced a pseudocyst, 2-litre pseudocyst on the tail end of my pancreas, and that basically put me in a very poorly state for about 3 months. I just sat at home in an armchair and struggled through it. The surgeon I was then referred to said, I think you've got cholangiocarcinoma, but I can't prove it. So because the pancreatitis is causing a lot of fuzziness on the CT scans, the PET scans, the MRIs weren't getting a clear picture. So we persevered. We couldn't get anything, couldn't see anything. We tried biopsies while we were doing an ERCP, still couldn't identify it. But my surgeon was great. He said, just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. During the course of this time, I also had to keep changing my stent, roughly about every 5-6 weeks, because it kept getting infected. And each time they did that, they would take a scraping of the inside of the bile duct, and eventually it came positive. And so he said, right, that's it, Whipple surgery for you. So I had a Whipple surgery. I was in hospital, had a few complications, a few leaks, a few stabbing pains, and every time he said, I think we can release you tomorrow, something else happened, and I ended up in hospital for 4 weeks in total. Once we'd done that, we got the histology report back, and that confirmed the cholangiocarcinoma for the very first time. So despite the fact I'd had symptoms in, well, effectively December 2017, it was July 2018 by the time I actually had the cholangio diagnosis confirmed. The operation was fairly successful, and there was some lymph nodes impacted, so I went on adjuvant chemo for 6 months and was feeling quite bullish. I thought, I've sort of got this licked, feeling pretty good. There's a few struggles with the Whipple surgery, but that was quite normal, so I thought things were going pretty well. That didn't go quite as planned. Once I'd finished the 6 months of the adjuvant chemo, they did a PET scan, showed me the PET scan, and I was lit up like a Christmas tree. We had 6 hot spots all over my torso, and the oncologist at the time said, but in fact, he was showing us, he was going through the scans and saying, well, you know, you've got this in your shoulder, and there's this in your liver, and that's outside the liver. And my wife just said, look, I'm a bit confused. What does all this mean? And he said, well, he's probably got about 2 to 4 months, 6 months if he's really lucky. So I think you need to get yourself booked into a hospice, start writing wills and getting things sorted out. And I think the words he used was prepare to meet your maker. And we left that conversation somewhat bewildered. I had absolutely no idea what that all meant. I was trying to sort of figure out with my wife, the children, what have you, what all that entailed, what we could get done. But I did ask him and say, can I carry on? Can we switch to Gemsys and do something different? He said, well, I don't know if it's really going to help, but, you know, what the hell, let's give it a shot. So we did switch the regime. I don't know, it's a bit like a salmon, I suppose. You want to go back to your place of origin. And I had this yearning to come back to the UK for one last time, say goodbye to people, friends and family. And when I did come back to the UK, I was very, very ill. I don't know whether it was the disease or whether it was the treatment, but I spent the 4 weeks that I was here in bed or in the local hospital. I went down to the local hospital because I wanted to continue the chemo even though I wasn't in Singapore, and they sort of said, like, you're in a bit of a mess. They gave me a number of blood transfusions. They filled me full of potassium and magnesium. I was on drips for days and days, and I'd say this was probably the turning point. I actually started to feel like I wasn't going to die, because just prior to that, I really didn't think I was going to make it back to Singapore, and we were sort of really preparing for the worst at that stage. But because I was feeling better, and this had sort of worked wonders, I made it back to Singapore, and over those few months, the GemSys started to work. I felt much better. We saw a lot of the hot spots recede, and I didn't think I was on the mend, but at least I'd got a few more. I felt like I'd got a bit more time than I was due, or at least what I'd been told initially. My eldest daughter had got a place at Texas University, so we returned. And just to sort of iterate how fortunate I was, while we were there, my wife said, there's a specialist up in London, one of the specialist centres, why don't you book an appointment and go and see him? And I said, look, I was getting a bit battle-weary at this stage, and I said, I don't really know if I can. They're probably going to want all my medical records, they're going to want this, they're going to want that. I don't think we're going to be able to get there. And she got behind me and said, no, make the phone call, find out. I'm not going to let you off the hook on this one. Made the phone call, was told, yes, we need the histology report, we need your scans, we need this, that, the other. And I said, you see, it's not meant to be. She said, okay, just call your oncologist in Singapore, speak to him, see what we can do. I remember it very clearly. It was a Thursday that this happened. Spoke to the oncologist. He said, let me see what I can do. Friday morning, all the reports that were required were in my mailbox. Singapore can be very efficient at times. And the following Monday, I had a meeting and was told that there was a trial available, an immunotherapy, which was great because it was for people who didn't have any actionable mutations. So that suited me down to the ground because I didn't have any. And I went on the trial. Didn't last very long, only 3 months, because my kidneys started to give in and my creatinine levels went through the roof, and I had to come off the trial. So I thought I might illustrate what that journey looked like in pictures. So September 2017, this is just a couple of months before it all started. I've always been a fairly hefty chap. I had stopped smoking in '98. My job took me to Hong Kong, and the air pollution was so bad I couldn't breathe and smoke at the same time, so I quit the cigarettes. Then in 2000, we had 2 children, so I stopped drinking. But my only vice was the Southeast Asian food, which I absolutely adored, and hence speaks to picture number 1. Picture number 2 was that was when I was in the UK and feeling dreadful, and I thought I wasn't going to make it. I'd lost so much weight, I'd actually stopped weighing myself, and switching from chemo to immunotherapy was I didn't feel dreadful. I actually felt really well within myself. There were a couple of subtly, and it before we murdered I think probably it's the lining of your stomach, it's this, it's that, and they persevered with that initial diagnosis, despite the fact various things don't work. And this is one of the problems with cholangiocarcinoma is we don't have the luxury of time. So the longer these juggling around with medication for a misdiagnosis, the more time it has to spread and grow. And this is one of the problems that we face. Some GPs are very switched on, and immediately they send people off to see an oncologist at a local hospital. And what tends to happen at the local hospitals is the disease is too far advanced, or they're not specialized in all the different treatments are available, and they tell the patient, I'm sorry, there's nothing more we can do for you. I'm afraid you're just going to have to go home, and that's it. That's pretty much all we can do. And when these people come into the forums in a state of despair, we tell them, please, go and get a second opinion. Go to one of the specialist centres, they're all listed in the AMMF website, and talk to somebody who really knows and understands this disease, because it will make the world of difference for you. And invariably it does. One of the issues, though, that I have been seeing in the last few months, though, is when they go and get a second opinion, they go back to the local hospital, and the local hospital says things like, what do they know? They think, specialists think they know everything. You're my patient, I know you better than they do, so we're just going to park whatever they say and carry on as they were before. Other hospitals have said, you don't need to go to a specialist hospital. There is nothing they can offer you that we can't offer you here. And are very, very reluctant either to allow those second opinions or even to take notice of them. Now, all these things I've listed here are observations. These are things that I've picked up. But that's probably, I've put that at the top because that's the one that scares me the most, and it's probably the story that we see the most often. The next one is, and I shared this as well, when I was first diagnosed, I had absolutely no idea what was going on. Now, if somebody talks to you about lung cancer or brain cancer, you've got a pretty good idea. If somebody mentions cholangiocarcinoma like they did to me, or bile duct cancer, I didn't even know what a bile duct was. And they try and explain, they draw lots of diagrams, and there's just so much to take in. And for months, we were just completely lost. We didn't really know what to do and just had to follow whatever the doctor was telling us. Thanks to the fact that we now have the internet, we were able to find, we came across the US site, the Cholangio Foundation, where there's a lot of people there, and Australia was the closest to me, so I joined that group, and we got a wealth of information from that. And that was wonderful support that we had. Right, so what I thought I'd do is finish off what I'd started on Wednesday and pick up from where I left off. So one of the things we were going to talk about was the fact that some of the GPs and the oncologists are not as familiar as we'd like them to be, and this manifests itself in GPs taking a very long time. They've got an idea in their mind what they're seeing, what their diagnosis is, and don't change their minds, and therefore patients are losing a lot of time. We also see, in particular in some of the smaller hospitals, that even the oncologists are out of their depth. They don't really understand the disease, and then they're telling people that they need to, there's nothing more they can do for them, and send them home. And those are potentially, I think, probably the most common stories that we hear, because they come to the forums desperate for information. What can I do? I'm not giving up, and I need more information. And we help them as much as we can to encourage them to get a second opinion and get help from the specialist hospitals that can deal with this. The other aspect is that's abundantly obvious when people come in is they're desperate. They've tried everything. They've spoken to different doctors at the local hospital. They've got no information to refer to. They are as clueless as I was when I was first diagnosed, feeling incredibly lonely, very frustrated, angry, and very, very lonely. And one of the things that we can do to address that, obviously, is to spread the awareness and get people, both in the NHS and outside the NHS, more familiar with cholangiocarcinoma, and hopefully everybody's seen what work goes into that to be making that happen. Another observation, and these are all our observations, is that we have a lot more women on the forums than men. I would guess that's roughly, it follows the 80-20 rule. As speaking as a man, I don't particularly like to talk about my problems, my symptoms. I want to show my family and friends that I'm strong and I'm tough, and that by and large I'm okay. And I think a lot of men try and do that. And this gets reflected in the fact that they're not very active on the forums, and either they're
their partners are stepping in, or people are advocating for their dad or their brothers. And that's something I would like to see change. I would like to see men talking more openly about their issues, about their fears, and that they're not well, because we are only human and it happens to all of us. Another thing that's worryingly not there is we don't talk about mental health very much. We don't talk to the doctors don't talk about mental health. Very few of the nurses talk about mental health. I think throughout my journey, I can't remember one time anybody asking, how are you coping emotionally with all of this? There was obviously a lot of talk about how am I feeling physically, but nobody really asked me how I was doing emotionally and how I was coping with a terminal diagnosis, how I was coping with a 10-hour surgery, how I was coping telling my family I'd only got 2 to 3 months to live. Just simply never discussed. And equally within the forums, people will express anger and frustration, but nobody really talks too much about how they're doing or how they're feeling. It does come up occasionally, and it's very prevalent on the bereavement forum, as you might expect. But I think we could probably do a better job of helping on mental health by talking about our issues more openly than we currently do. And I certainly feel that the medical profession could step up to the plate a lot more and just ask those simple questions, or make it almost mandatory, like seeing a dietitian, to also be able to see a psychiatrist or some form of counsellor to help you through those very, very difficult times. One of the things that a lot of people raise on the forums is that the availability of drugs seems to be much more of a problem, or the lack of availability of drugs, should I say, in the UK compared to what we see in the US on their discussion forums. They have drugs approved, trialed, approved, and being dispensed years in advance of the UK. And similarly with Europe, not quite as much as the UK, but we see drugs being approved across Europe that aren't available in the UK. And people ask, why are these drugs not available quicker in the UK when they are so readily available in other parts of the world? And we would certainly like to see that addressed. There's a couple of points that I've felt personally that surprised me a little bit when I first was diagnosed, is that all my friends and family, everybody suddenly became an expert on how to cure cancer. And they were offering me all sorts of advice about fasting and no sugar, and if you only eat fruit, you'll cure your cancer. They all mean well, but it was overwhelming. I found that everybody had a book to give me and everybody had advice, and they would keep ringing me up to seeing if I'm following their advice. And it's very hard to say to them, I'm really sorry, I'm completely overwhelmed. Could you please leave me alone? I couldn't say that. I felt like saying that. But I was absolutely swamped with everybody offering advice, and it was all very well-meaning, but it was completely and utterly overwhelming. And it became quite a burden to carry, to keep explaining to people that I'm doing the best I can and I'm following my doctor's advice, and thank you so much for all this extra help. I'll get round to it at some stage, and hopefully that dealt with it. But that took me by surprise. I really wasn't expecting that. And the other thing that I wasn't expecting was some of the things that happen on social media, where people who are not qualified doctors, they're not qualified in any way, shape or form, actively telling people not to go to doctors because chemotherapy is a big money spinner for the pharmaceutical companies, that a cure for cancer already exists, but they don't want to tell anybody about it. So don't talk to doctors, but take their snake oil instead. And I would strongly advise people to listen to evidence-based medicine. Everybody knows somebody who's been cured through eating some kind of plant or drinking some kind of concoction. And if you want to try that, great, but please follow your advice from your doctor and talk to your doctor about. If you want to try alternative medicine, by all means do, but talk to your doctor about it. And if you've got any doubts about what I'm saying, look up what happened to Steve Jobs and his cancer journey. I haven't had any treatment now for 4 years. So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about what it's like living with cancer. And most of my burdens are related to having Whipple surgery. So I have to take omeprazole every day to control the acid in my stomach. I have to take Crayon because my gallbladder was removed and the head of my pancreas was. So that gives me additional enzymes. So taking that medication is, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't feel great if I ever forget. I'm also starting to become diabetic. My surgeon did tell me, he said within 2 years, you're probably going to be a type 2 diabetic. It's been 6 years. I'm currently at the pre-diabetic stage and I monitor it very closely, but I'm definitely getting there, and that's okay. I can live with that. The other thing I found as well is that my constitution's a bit shot to pieces. I have strength, I have stamina, I can exercise, but if I overexert myself, I have shivers, I feel like I've got the flu, I get mouth ulcers, I get cold sores, and I'm completely run down. So if I spend 3 or 4 days in London, I basically am wiped out for a week. So I know my constitution's not great, so I have to make sure that I don't overexert myself too much, and just do everything in moderation. But at the end of the day, these are all trivial matters against the prize of still being alive today. Quite frankly, I think I could have put up with just about anything. Put it into context, it's like needing to have your leg amputated, but you don't, and you're left with a limp instead. You don't really worry about the limp. I don't really worry about the other things that I've got to deal with, because the one thing I have discovered a lot of is gratitude. Just waking up each morning and still being here is a wonderful feeling. And I think the way I look at it is every day now is a blessing. It's a day I didn't think I would have. I don't look at how many years have been robbed from me. I look at how many extra days I've been given, and each one's a gift, which I'm incredibly grateful for. So just to wrap up, there are a few things that I would like to ask. And the first one is to everybody, both inside and outside of the NHS, is keep spreading the word about cholangiocarcinoma. Tell as many people as you can about it. Speak to as many people as you can about it. When somebody asks me, what's wrong with you, what have you got, I say cholangiocarcinoma. Not because I want to sound smart, but it always begs the question, what the hell's that? And as soon as they ask, what's that? Then I've got them on the hook, and then I can explain it's bile duct cancer, and these are the issues, these are the problems. It's not very well known about. That's why I haven't heard the name before. To help educate them, I post about it regularly on my social media accounts, so that all my friends know. And I've told them my mission is to educate them to the point that they know exactly what cholangiocarcinoma is. So if it happens to any of their relatives or friends, they can help them in the same manner that the groups helped me when I was first diagnosed. For patients and carers, as I've mentioned, please follow evidence-based medication. Don't fall into the traps that are out there of people offering you all these life-saving remedies with no backup, no data, no evidence whatsoever. They might know somebody's uncle's cousin's neighbour, but please just stick with the evidence-based medication. And finally, to everybody, live long and prosper.